I mean, this is a big step because it is affecting 25% of the EU's oil imports. And oil imports are actually Russia's main way of making money. While the EU is more dependent on Russian gas, about 45% of gas imports, Russia actually makes less money from its gas exports. So this measure is able to hurt Russia maximally while hurting the EU minimally when compared with the possibility of a gas embargo. This is going to have a big effect on Russia, but it could also have a big blowback effect on the EU. It is going to have a significant impact on the energy markets here. What exactly it's going to do, we're just going to have to sit back, wait, and see. Now, there's no getting over the fact that this is only a partial embargo. It is affecting only 2/3 of Russian imports, only the imports that come by sea. All pipeline imports, which are 1/3 of Russian oil imports, are exempt. However, Germany and Poland have promised verbally not to use this exemption. They say they will phase out all Russian oil, including pipeline oil, by the end of the year, along with everyone else. So that leaves just Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary making use of this exemption. That represents about 10% of the EU's Russian oil imports, which is not a huge amount. This is maybe not as good of a look as it would have been to have a complete embargo, but at the same time, 90% is still pretty high.
90% still pretty high, Dave. I'm reading you here the reaction of Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, in the last hour, saying when over 50 days have passed between the 5th and 6th sanctions packages, the situation is not acceptable for us. Going forward, is there a way to make 27 nations agree on something so big?
I mean, not without treaty change. What he's referring to there is that really the only thing that took so long here is that Hungary was blocking it. And the EU kept making new offers to Hungary about how it would end its veto. Finally, this compromise floated over the weekend that they would exempt all pipeline imports, was able to get past that veto threat. But as long as individual countries are able to exercise their veto power over foreign policy issues, any single EU leader can hold the rest of the Union to ransom. There's not a whole lot they can do about it. And we know that Hungary is not singing from the same hymn sheet on the subject of Ukraine as all other 26 EU countries. It is very much alone here. So going forward, this is going to continue to be a difficulty. It would continue to be a difficulty if they now start considering a 7th sanctions package. I'm hearing varied accounts of whether that's really a realistic possibility at this point. But certainly Hungary is going to remain a problem because Viktor Orban just does not agree with the other EU leaders about their perspective on this war.
Yeah, you mentioned the potential for blowback. Another precinct heard from is Moscow itself. There was cutting natural gas to the Netherlands this Tuesday. Wednesday, it's going to be the turn of Denmark. And we heard some remarks from the Russian foreign minister himself, Sergei Lavrov, in Bahrain, who, when asked about the effective embargo on the export of grain and other wheat from the Black Sea ports in Ukraine, said that it wasn't up to Russia, but to the Ukrainians to stop mining the waters. He went further.
Therefore, all initiatives that are being voiced now on the topic of food security should be solved, given that the Russian side has long guaranteed everything that depends on us. But the Western countries, which have created a lot of artificial problems by closing their ports to Russian ships, by blocking logistics and financial chains, they should, of course, seriously think about what is more important for them: media attention on the problem of food security, or solve problems with concrete steps. It's up to them.
So, Dave Keating, beyond fact-checking the veracity of the Russian foreign minister's statement there, there is that issue of how this is going to play out in the rest of the world, especially when it comes to this issue of food security.
Yeah, the EU was very keen to push back on this narrative being spread by Russia that the EU is somehow responsible for the growing global food crisis. Ursula von der Leyen, Commission President, just now in her final press conference said basically Lavrov is lying, that the EU has no such export restrictions on grain. The EU is not doing any of those things that you just heard in that soundbite. And they stressed that it is Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia blocking the grain, and also Russia blocking its own grain exports that's causing this growing food crisis that is particularly affecting North Africa. The EU has also been keen to point out that it's not the EU that's getting hurt here. It's developing countries, particularly in Africa. Now, they adopted conclusions on the growing food crisis issue today after discussing the issue for several hours. And the warnings here are quite grave. They're welcoming global moves by the UN to try to deal with the issue. They are hugely increasing their own export of grain. They make a reference to the common agricultural policy in these conclusions, saying they're going to mobilize the CAP to try to deal with this issue. Basically, they know something huge is coming here, and they're trying to position themselves to try to get ahead of it as much as possible. But you can see in these conclusions, this is a really, really difficult issue. They're going to do all they can. They say they're also going to try to get grain out of Ukraine and into EU ports so that it can be exported from EU ports. But I think the main preoccupation today was trying to counter this Russian narrative because President Zelensky, when he addressed the EU leaders by video last night, he told them Russia is convincing the developing world that it is the EU that's responsible for the food supply crisis and not Russia. And so I think after hearing that last night, various EU leaders today wanted to say very publicly that the EU is not responsible for that, and what Russia is saying is not true.
And we'll be talking about it in the France 24 debate. Many thanks, Dave Keating, reporting live at the